Hello, my sensational students. Welcome to Bloom and Grow Education. My name is Meredith. Today's lesson is a writing lesson. It is suitable for Year 5 students who are preparing for the Gifted and Talented test. And it's one of my lessons where I look at my students' work and give them feedback. And in turn, that helps you to learn to improve your own writing. Research shows that it's a really good way of helping to improve students' writing, which is why I like to do these lessons. Today, we are looking at a robot stimulus. It is part of the Risking Robots series. So there are lots of great videos in this series describing robots, unique idea development around robot stories. It's a really fun series. It's a little bit different to what I've done before. The stimulus that we are looking at is this one here, with this picture of this robot and the workers in the farm. And the story that we are looking at is I've called it Robot Apocalypse. I wanted to call it Zombie Apocalypse, but then I thought that might be a little bit scary for some children. So apocalypse means that it's the end of the world. And with this story, we are going to be looking at what areas she's done well and what areas that we can improve upon. And the main area is in the resolution and conclusion. But let's get started. Let me read it to you, and then we'll have a chat about it. We finally arrived to Island of Rob. I thought it would be easy. This will be fun. Come on, I yelled. George, I don't think this is a good idea, said Greg. Why? I questioned. I heard that people who come here will become slaves, Greg explained. Stop lying. Let's explore, I said, as I pulled Greg's arm. He had a very worried look on his face. We walked for about 15 minutes and we finally made it inland where we are right now. It is beautiful. The farms are colourful with fruits and vegetables. There is not a single patch of dead grass here, and the sunset is amazing. George? Greg called calmly. Yeah, I answered. Thanks for taking me here, Greg said. I was about to say you're welcome, but then my mouth froze. I saw something horrifying. A bunch of dead people, all in a group. This is the island of Rob, said a deeper voice. Who said that? Questioned Greg. Me, Robert the robot, said the robot. You two are my new slaves. Now help me with this farm. Otherwise, I'll kill you like I did to those guys, Robert said, pointing to the dead people. Greg and I did not want to be killed, so we were now Robert's slaves from now on. I thought to myself, I should have listened to Greg. Now I have to listen to this stupid robot for centuries. It's all because of my stupidity that we have to do this. I wish I could go home and relax. Then the next day I got a letter from my mum. It said, I'm dead now, but this robot is for you to look after you. Have fun. So my mum was behind all of this robot business. I wonder why. Okay, let's have a look at what she's done well. So one of the things I've been working on with my students is speech, and one of the things that most students forget to do with their speech is drop to a new line every time a new character is speaking. So she's done a beautiful job with that. She has also done a beautiful job here with her punctuation. So what the character is actually saying is in the speech marks, then the punctuation, then the speech marks, and then it's not just Greg said, George said, Greg said. We've got questioned, explained, answered, called. So she's breaking up that vocabulary there as well, which I really like. Good paragraphing. So it's nice and clear in her paragraphing, like question. This is a descriptive paragraph about the area. We've got our problem here, these two paragraphs here, and then this is our resolution and conclusion. So she's done her paragraphing beautifully, and her structure is all there. Let's have a look at some and also titles. A title is something that in both NAPLAN and GAT you get a point for, and it's a really simple thing to get a point for. So make sure you do that. Let's have a talk about some areas that she could improve. Now, there are lots of little things that I can nitpick at. For example, it's best to keep your digits for maths. She should have written the word 15, Fifteen. And here, and some little editing things like I saw something horrifying here. But the main thing is in her resolution and conclusion, it doesn't quite work. So you've met this, we're on this beautiful island, which all of a sudden, we're on this beautiful island, where they're there having fun exploring. And then all of a sudden, this Grim Reaper style robot of death comes with his army of dead people and forces them into slavery, which is this huge, exciting idea. And they just go, oh, well, I guess we're just slaves now. And then in the conclusion, it's just like, oh, my mom decided to set me up as a slave. She's dead now. And the resolution and the conclusion don't actually resolve or conclude anything. It's really weak. And typically what happens in these kinds of situations, and it's understandable because 25 minutes is not a lot of time to write. She probably would have done a better job if she'd had, say, the 42 minutes of nap plan. But what she needed to do, and this is feedback I give quite often, is she needed to shorten the beginning so that she had more time to resolve and conclude properly, because probably what happened is she ran out of time, or she wasn't really hugely sure. Like, she had this idea about these slaves and these robots and this zombie apocalypse kind of a thing, but she wasn't really clear in her end idea. So my recommendation is that when you go to write your story, I know it's really tempting to get straight into writing your story because it's so short on time, but just do like I, P, R, and C on the side of your page. And even usually I say save your digits for maths, but we're just throwing down words, throwing down ideas, and you're trying to do it quickly. So 2 friends on island, enslaving robot grabs them. Resolution. So the resolution that she wrote in her story is, oh, I guess we're just slaves now. So let's have a think, what would be a more powerful resolution? And also we have to consider our time constraints. So let me have a think aloud. We don't have lots of time to have this masterful escape or this masterful rebellion against the robots. We could maybe do something. You guys know it, like in The Wizard of Oz, how there's the wizard behind the curtain. Yeah, she finally gets to the Emerald City, and Toto reveals behind the curtain it was really just a man who appeared big and scary. So maybe you could do like an avatar kind of a thing where really there's a human inside the robot that's controlling it, everything. Maybe we could go down that path. Maybe we could go down a path where they do accept their fate, but give more detail in it. So there's another one that I have put into this series where I do that kind of an ending, so I'm not going to do it again. It's called Escape, and it's a very, very similar kind of a storyline. So if you want to look at like they just accept their fate and give up and die kind of an ending, check out the description box where that one will be linked. It's called Escape. We could have them attempt an escape, but we would have had to make the beginning awfully short in order to have the time to do that. And one of the things that is the problem here is that she's wasted too much time. So although I love all of this beautiful speech marks that she's done, it's taking too long to get to the problem. And if she had more time, beautiful, leave all this. But she needs to take all of this and get it down into one paragraph. So as something like maybe leave this paragraph, but add on to it So we could keep this line here. We finally arrived at the island of Rob. We walked for about 15 minutes inland where we are right now. It's beautiful. George, my friend Greg called calmly. Thanks for taking me here. That's when we froze. So I've cut out by doing that. I've taken out this, and this. And we could maybe even have shortened some of this down as well. So it's given me more time further down. Okay, so, and even this part in here, we maybe could have shortened that down as well. So this is the part, the problem resolution and conclusion are the key parts. And so that you can really get into sort of your let me say that again. Your resolution and conclusion are your key parts, and they're often the part that fall apart. So you've got to have a good idea, but you've got to have a good idea for your problem, but most students have good ideas for their problems and then they resolve them and conclude them weakly. So here is where we need to fix this. Robert said, pointing to the dead people, Greg and I did not want to be killed, so we are now his slaves. Let's rewrite this. Let me just come back and we'll just do this for a second. So our resolution is, I think the resolution I'm going to go with is that person inside the robot thing. And then they're going to conclude it by escaping. So because they've been able to kill the terrible, evil robot, therefore they're able to escape. A hoe is like a pick, and tilling the ground is like you get it and you go into the ground to loosen it up. Okay, so that's the end of our problem. So how do we resolve this? Okay, so we worked for many months in the baking sun, slowly starving to death, becoming ready to join the other slaves who had worked to their deaths. So I've got work and work. So I'm going to change that to labored, which is the same thing. Now I wanted to write to their graves, but they're not in a grave, which is sort of the entire point. Slowly starving to their death, becoming ready to join the other slaves who had been, how about what I just say is slowly starving, ready to join the other ones in their death. Okay, so I'm at the point now where, so I've shown that they're working away, and now I need this robot to start to die in himself. The robot whipped us to work faster, but soon he began to act strangely. Now I want to say strange noises, but I've just used strangely, so I'm going to use peculiar. Okay, so I've started to establish there's this strange thing happening. Is something happening in the robot's chest, within the robot's chest. Sounds suspiciously like coughing, but we're going to work on. The robot slowed, his movements labored, which means it's hard work for him to be able to move. His hinges groaning. Wires began to, so I'm thinking about what would happen if a robot was dying, if a robot was breaking apart. So he's going to slow down, he's going to begin to groan, like his hinges, his wires are going to zap and spark. Okay, so I'm pretty much at the point now where I've described this robot's degradation. But what I'm starting to think is, what has caused this robot to suddenly start behaving like this? And I'm wondering if it's a robot and it's not waterproof and there's a big storm and he gets wet, well, how would he respond to that? It would probably start to break down. So let's go back and change that. Now, obviously you're going to be handwriting this in the test. So what you can do is we want to come back into here. So put a little asterisk and a little arrow to show the marker that we're inserting something in here. Ominous means scary, bad, something bad is going to happen. Unrelenting, if you relent, it means you give up. So my daughter nagged at me until I relented and gave her a cookie. So if you are unrelenting, it means that you don't give up. So the storm just kept on going. unexpectedly and unrelentingly. Okay, so how is it that this robot, so I've got the rain all falling down, humans are safe because they can survive a bit of water. How is it that this robot gets covered in so much water? So he's heavy, it's a farm, he's going to get clogged down in the mud. Okay, so if we had thought of this before, we could use this as our opportunity to escape. So we run and escape. But we didn't think of this before, so we have two options. We can continue with this idea here. So we could say that, and then that allows us to come into here. So let's rearrange this so it starts to make a little bit more sense. I know that in the actual test, when you're handwriting it, you won't have this option, but just I don't want you to be getting confused with what I'm missing. Okay. So the blue sky, so we didn't want to die, so we reluctantly picked up our hoe and began to till the ground. The gorgeous skies covered in the rain came with the rain. There's a big storm. We were too frightened to risk escape, so we continued on. We labored for many months in the baking sun, and he starts to die, and the rust grew like mold on his metal sides. A dinghy is just a little boat. Okay, so sometimes when we are writing a story, it starts to take on a bit of a different direction than what we expect, and that's totally okay. As the ideas start to unfold in your mind and unfold onto the paper, things change. And just because it is written in your planning or in your head doesn't mean you have to stick to it. As you're going, if you're like, oh, actually that resolution doesn't really work, or actually that conclusion's a bit lame, change it. That's okay. As long as you've got introduction, problem, resolution, conclusion, it's totally okay for you to do that. So the journey that story went on as the ideas were unfolding in my mind wasn't really what I was expecting or what I planned. So I've ended up sort of coming up with two different stories. This is the first one. So Robert and I did not want to die, so we reluctantly picked up our hoe and began to till the ground. The gorgeous blue skies slowly covered in ominous dark clouds that grew more terrifying with each day. Then suddenly, a colossal storm let loose. The rain tore down on us unexpectedly and unrelentingly. George and I escaped into the cover of the trees, but the heavy robot became stuck in the mud puddles that quickly grew all over the freshly tilled land, or even you could say loosened land. He was trapped. We were too frightened to run and risk escape, so we waited the storm out and continued to work. We labored for many more months in the baking sun, slowly starving, becoming ready to join the other slaves who had been worked to their deaths. Every day the robot whipped us to work faster, but soon he began to act strangely. Peculiar noises came from the robot's chest, an echoing sound that sounded, we can't have sounded and sounded, an echoing noise that sounded suspiciously like coughing. We worked on. The robot slowed, his movements labored, his hinges groaning. Wires began to zap and spark. Petrol, we're saying began a lot, so let's make it leaked from his joints, and rust grew like mold on his metal sides. Then one day he collapsed, shaking, whirring, and then nothing. I'll turn that into two sentences. He stopped. George and I stood watching him, uncertain what to do. Then the other dead people around us began to collapse, as if the magic keeping them moving had also died. There was complete silence and stillness on the farm. George and I looked at each other. Somehow, we knew it was all over. We raced back to the shore where our little dinghy still sat and paddled as fast as we could away from the island. So this has now resolved all of that, and this has concluded all of that. And one of the things that I could have taken out this part here. So this is the other option of what we could have done. Robert and I did not want to die, so we reluctantly picked up the hoe and began to till the ground. The gorgeous blue sky slowly covered in ominous dark clouds that grew more terrifying with each day. Then suddenly a colossal storm let loose. The rain poured down on us unexpectedly and unrelentingly. George and I escaped to the cover of the trees, but the heavy robot became stuck in the mud puddles that quickly grew all over the freshly tilled lands. Now, instead of having the part in there where the robot begins to degrade and die, we're going to just insert the conclusion in here. So we need to put in a little linking sentence here. Okay. So the storm finally cleared, but for the robot, it was too late. The water had leaked, or I could say the rain had leaked into every crevice and joint. As the sun shone through the clearing clouds, he collapsed, shaking, whirring, and then nothing. And we could put even an ellipsis in here. He stopped. George and I stood watching, uncertain of what to do. Then the other dead people around us began to collapse, as if the magic keeping them moving had also died. There was complete silence and stillness on the farm. George and I looked at each other. Somehow we knew it was all over. We raced back to the shore where our little dinghy still sat, paddled away as fast as we could. So that first option, that longer one where we had the description of the robot falling apart, rusting, sparking, you could probably do that one in the 42 minutes of NAPLAN. But with the GAT test, you probably don't have that time, and you needed to just go straight into that second option where he's stuck in the mud and the rain just causes him to die. You probably needed that second ending given the time constraints, which is a real shame because it was cool having the robots sort of die and spark and bring in all that descriptive vocabulary. Now, so a lot of that description that I was using just then has come from my descriptive writing lesson, which you will find linked in the description box below. So we looked at some different successful authors and the way they had described robots. We pulled lots of vocabulary together from things we could see about robots and what they would sound like to create a really powerful description of a robot. And rather than just describing the robot, I've described... So rather than like a clunky, the robot was made of metal and was very tall, I've described the robot through his degradation towards his death, which is just a different way of doing it, which was a cool way of doing it as well. So it's a shame that you would have to cut that out, but you've also got to conclude the story within the 25 minutes. So this lesson was me showing you how you can create a more powerful resolution and conclusion by pulling out some of that build-up, introduction, description stuff at the beginning, which wasn't so important, so that we had time to come up with a more effective resolution and conclusion, and then how you might have gone about doing that. Okay, that brings me to the end of the lesson. Thank you so much for joining me. Please check out the other videos in the series. I think you'll really enjoy them. And also please like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. It really helps me out so that I can keep on going with these videos. I'll see you at the next lesson.